Hey everybody, this is Kevin Deline, and I'm excited to welcome you to my podcast called Shop Talk, where we're going to interview local entrepreneurs and community leaders to hopefully get actionable insights on how they've built their lives and their businesses that you, the audience, can take with them and hopefully implement into your life and your business. Well, Chris, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Everybody, this is Chris Stepanitis with Heartland Garage Builders, among many other roles.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on to tell us about your business and your story.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
So, I guess maybe if you could start out by giving everybody your intro, what you're doing, where you came from.
How much time do we have? So a long, convoluted journey. Grew up in the trades. My dad was a business owner. Been on job sites since I can remember. Really loved the construction sites. Didn't really care for how he felt at the end of the day. So I really wanted to lean into going into the design side of it with architectural services.
Felt like physically, you mean, like getting your body to
I mean, I don't remember, my dad ever really playing with us in the yard. He was always tired, exhausted. And I mean, he was engaged, sort of, but I mean, working 8-10 hours laying brick, because he was a bricklayer. It's a pretty tough way to go.
Yeah.
So, at that point, when I got through high school, realizing I liked the construction environment, I like having that tangible thing at the end of the day to say, hey, I accomplished that. Decided I wanted to go to architecture school. So went to college, was lucky enough to get a scholarship and play volleyball, and then ended up at grad school for architecture and found out didn't like sitting in front of a computer designing, bathrooms on CAD. So first job out of school was working for a regional home builder and kind of got into construction management. And
did you start off in the field building stuff, or were you just
strictly management? Yeah, it was funny because of my background in architecture. It was right in the middle of the housing boom, right in 2001. So, everybody that was an ex-carpenter was trying to be a project manager, to get out of, actually wearing pouches. But because of my background in design, I was lucky enough to find a builder that thought that was advantageous for them in terms of problem solving stuff in the field. And hired me right out of school. There was zero experience. It was a great family-owned business, so I thought it was going to be there for a little while until I really figured out what I wanted to do in my life. And then I was there for almost 5 years, learned a ton.
And that was residential construction?
Yeah, all was residential. I've only done a little bit of light commercial stuff, mostly with the waterproofing and stuff that we'll talk about in a little bit. But home building, and then jumped around to a couple, regional home builders, and then the market crashed in 2008. So that was a tough gig. Right before 2008 happened, I decided that I wanted to start my own company like my dad. Worst timing ever to start a remodeling business.
Because it was great right when you decided to incept the idea.
The first year, right? The first year was great, and I grew up super poor, right? So after having a company that was doing really well, next thing I bought a truck. I built myself a house, all those types of things, and then the market crashed and lost everything and lost friends, which was kind of an interesting situation, how that happens that you go through. But I think I would still go through it again, knowing that how much I learned, which is kind of an awkward thing to say. My wife would probably disagree with that, but
sometimes the school of hard knocks is the best way, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and then that's how I ended up in waterproofing. Where we actually eventually met. I ended up I needed a job. There was no jobs in Chicago. I almost moved to Wyoming to take a job, and my wife didn't want to do that, because we're based here in the Chicagoland area. But I took a sales job at U.S. Waterproofing. Totally as a stopgap. I wasn't a sales guy. I was, out in the field dealing with the trades. Ended up doing really well. Stayed there for 5 years and really learned about the business side of business rather than just the sticks and bricks, so to speak. Loved it. Learned a lot. Had a great mentor there. Then just kind of hit a ceiling that I thought, this is a pretty cool business. There's a lot of bad companies that do it, so I decided to start my own company. That's where we actually met. So.
Yeah. It was probably, it had to be like maybe the first year you started, because you started when you started 2018?
Late 2017.
Yeah. So that was probably, I think, first project was in South Shore Club there in Fontana, and that was probably right then. So
Yeah. It was, pretty much right when we started. It was back when I was doing everything. I had one other guy with me, and, if I wasn't doing the work, he was. So it was school of hard knocks yet again. But I had now gone through 2 positions where I learned the field stuff, and I was lucky enough to learn about the sales and marketing side of it, which when you're in the field, it's always that battle between the field and the office. Like, the sales guys need to sell better. And you really find out sales and make the world go round, because if you don't sell the work, there's nothing to build.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So I really learned a lot.
Most problems can be solved by more sales, right?
Yeah, a lot of respect for the sales guys, especially the ones that do a really good job and really aren't about just trying to get a deal done, where they really are trying to take into account not only the customer's best interests, but the company's as well, and kind of make everybody happy. And think big picture is kind of a rare find as well. And I was lucky enough where I kind of turned into one of those when I was at US, and started my own thing. It was great. And then my current business partner, Andrew, kind of reached out and said, hey, we should do a business together. And we should build garages. And long, convoluted story there. But initially I said no, because I was busy with waterproofing. It was growing great. We were up to, I think, 7 or 8 employees at that time. And, life was good. So he came back to me like 9 months later and said, hey, we really should do this. I said, all right, we'll, take a look at it. And so we ended up looking at the paperwork and thought, okay, that'd be a great side job, for me, just kind of keep that creative juice flowing from the architecture side of it. That's the one thing I didn't get in the waterproofing was it was really nitty gritty. It was great helping people and problem solve. But I kind of lacked that.
You're not designing really. You're designing maybe a system.
You're
but
definitely
not,
problem solving, right?
Yeah.
Where sometimes you have to be creative. But in terms of, it wasn't sexy and glamorous necessarily.
Yeah.
And I think in hindsight, I needed a little bit of that. That's why I really liked the home building side of it. So I started doing the garages, and within a year and a half, 2 years, it really turned into something that was way more than just kind of a weekend warrior type thing. And ultimately, had to make a decision between the two businesses because they were both starting to suffer. We had long conversations about finding good help and getting guys to stay, and how do you manage that whole process. And it got really tedious. I think we've talked. It's kind of similar to your business, where I wasn't hiring plumbers and carpenters. It was really just kind of general labor. Really hard to find guys in terms of scope of work.
Well, you tell them your job today is going to be to carry 10,000 pounds of crushed concrete out of a basement.
Right. Up the stairs, down the hall. And by the way, you can't get the floor dirty.
Yeah,
Don't
you got to walk
dirty.
very meticulously. It's not an easy sell.
Right. Yeah, it's hard work, right? I mean, we definitely paid well. We definitely paid more than what our competitors were paying their labor, which is why I was able to find guys initially. But then COVID happened, and everybody was super busy. Labor was at a premium, and then I decided to jump full bore with Heartland Garages, and it's going like gangbusters. It's been great.
That's awesome.
Without the headaches of who's not going to show up today, how do I shuffle the schedule? How do I keep the customers happy? How do we keep the schedule moving forward?
Is that because it's mainly contract work, right? So people are obligated to fulfill their
duties.
Correct.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, there's still scheduling issues, just like anything.
It's construction,
but,
right?
The way we've tried to organize our business is, again, not only treat customers better, but also treat our subcontractors better. We pay within 72 hours of them finishing. We try and make sure that somebody's on site for all the inspections, so they don't have to deal with the municipalities. All those little things. And hopefully, if they have to choose between our job and somebody else's job, they'll choose ours because we kind of treat them a little better. So, knock on wood, so far it's going really well.
It helps you with scheduling too when they go between the guy who pays net 60 and the guy who pays net 2.
Yeah, I mean, it is a thing. Sometimes it puts us a little bit at a difficult position. Sometimes, but. Especially if a client slow pays or, we have issues with that on occasion, just like anybody else. But we feel that should be our problem, not our subcontractor's problem, right?
Yeah, that's why they're working underneath your banner, right?
Yeah, that's the whole idea, right? Yeah. And the goal is to really have work be consistent enough where they don't really have to try and go and find work, right? We have some guys that still do some retail type stuff, and that's a grind as well.
Yeah,
which is great. So far it's been really good. Although, just like before, you can always find. It's always hard to find good help.
Yeah.
We could probably double our business if we could find quality carpenters.
How big of a radius? So, and just to set the stage for everybody, so you're building just strictly detached garages, correct?
Well, since we last talked, actually, that's changed a little bit. The business got started as primarily a detached garage builder. My partner, Andrew, we met at a previous remodeling company, worked together back in 05, 07, something like that. And he has a background in like permitting, zoning, things of that nature. So he did a lot of permitting work for some of the.
Dry.
Sorry, Andrew, but it is. He had done a lot of permitting and zoning for some of the larger garage builders that are in the Chicagoland area, and found that one of the major players had gotten bought by another remodeling company, and services really fell down the Wayne side. So he really thought there was. At one point, talking about 1,000 garages that weren't getting built in the Chicagoland area just because that one company's book of business had slid so far in that 12 months. We started with detached garages. Well, we found it's pretty seasonal. in Chicago, southern Wisconsin, it's freeze and thaw cycle, so you can't do a floating slab during the winter. So we had that 3 or 4 month blip where there's not a whole lot going on because you can't pour concrete. So within the last year or so, we started going into attached garages, which we found there was a big need for. Because a small, so a lot of people have 2-car garages. They just really want that third bay for their classic car or their kid's car. Most GCs don't really want to deal with that project because it's so small, and all the other garage builders want nothing to do with it because the permitting is more intense, the zoning's more intense, the concrete work is more intense because now
just because it's attached to the existing
correct.
structure.
Yeah, exactly. So we found there's really a kind of a nice little niche there for us to slide into, and coincidentally, that's concrete work we can do during
I was just about to ask. So how does that work? Why
because
can't you do it?
Yeah, because floating slabs, right, we're 12 inches in the ground for the detached garages, whereas an attached garage we're required to do a 4-foot foundation. So we're outside the frost line.
Gotcha.
We can do that work during the winter, which really helps the ebb and flow from our business standpoint, but also for the trades. There's guys that run out of work during the winter.
Yeah, they're twiddling their fingers, waiting for the next job.
Yeah,
right?
go off, take a month-long vacation somewhere, and do something along those lines. But this year we've really kind of evened out that cyclical nature of the business. We're hoping to do another double the amount of those types of projects over next winter.
Wow,
to really help it. So really no complaints. It's really kind of nice how that's worked out. So
that's an industry I did not know was a big industry, right?
Neither did I. When my partner first approached me about it, I was like, garages. That
Yeah.
sounds kind of weird and boring and cookie cutter. Because again, I grew up in the city. Everything's a 20 by 20 box with a hip roof, and there's no gutters, and there's no drywall, there's no anything.
It's
but
just put your car or all your shit in there, right?
Yeah, literally a covered box is all really it is. I just wanted to get my car out of the snow. But again, because we're based in the North Shore and North Burbs, we found that there's a lot of people, especially with COVID, people really wanted an extra office space because everybody's working from home. They wanted a yoga studio, a craft space, or again, because the kids were at home because of COVID, just dumped the play space for the kids.
Yeah.
So we really got into doing a lot of custom garages, kind of man cave type stuff, vaulted ceilings, yoga studios, home theaters, golf simulators, and it's kind of really morphed our business into what we originally thought was going to have to be a high volume kind of churn and burn business to we do projects that are 5, 6, 7, 8 times as big as one of those other type simple boxes. So,
and are you designing a lot of them?
Yeah, because my background, I do all the conceptual drawings for them.
Okay.
I use a 3D rendering software. So again, back to the custom nature. People don't understand just a flatline drawing, right? So being able to give them 3D renderings really helps with that process.
Yeah, probably helps your sales process, right? They're like, oh, I can see a tangible.
Well, it does, right?
Yeah.
You actually see, this is how much I'm paying, but what am I actually getting for that? I mean, yeah, it's great to have a list of materials and selections, but at the end of the day, what is it going to look like? And when you're spending, a lot of money on a garage, you kind of have to not justify it, but it does have to make a little bit of sense because it's more of a want than a need, right? And it really helps us in terms of competitors too, because most of the competitors are still operating like they did in the 60s. I mean, they do paper contracts. It's all handwritten sketches. Half of it you can't read.
Which has got to be scary for the consumer where you're just sign this dotted line, give me 60 grand down, and here's my garage.
I agree. I know I wouldn't sign something like that. But there's companies that build 200-300 garages a year operating that way. So
I guess more power to them. They have less overhead, I guess, but.
Yeah, but at the same time, are they missing out on a lot of business just because people don't either don't know, don't trust it, who
and they might not be as good of a product, right? Because then your customer might not fully understand what they're getting. They get it done, and they're like, "This is somewhat okay, but it's not really what I wanted."
Yeah, or we have some companies that we compete against that'll tell the homeowner, you have to get your own architect. The permit's on you. That type of stuff. We're full service. We'd probably more akin to a design and build firm than we are just a straight, garage builder.
What do you guys use to set yourself apart? I know a long time ago we talked about adding water management systems and things like that other companies are just oversighting.
Yeah, great point. We actually all those things, right? It's wanting to be more full service, one stop shop. A lot of the other garage builders, the homeowner has to provide light fixtures. We have a full line of fixtures that we stock. Obviously, they can deviate from that, but we've got. We do drywall. We'll do slat board for accessories to hang garden tools and sports equipment. We'll do car lifts. We do epoxy floors. And then back to that, water management, we'll do, gutter extensions, downspout extensions, yard drainage. We've partnered with a great driveway company that'll even do, driveway replacements, orientations, and all sorts of stuff like that to try and give them one stop to do it. Because a homeowner's hiring you to be the general contractor. They don't want to be the general contractor.
Yeah.
And to be a garage builder, like, we're going to do all of this, but, you got to do the permit.
Yeah.
But you got to find your driveway guy. But you have to bring me light fixtures. Don't get me wrong. A lot of builders still operate that way. We just found that, I think we could do better.
Yeah, I if I were to be in the market for one, I would want it to be that way.
Yeah.
And I know relatively no construction, and I still wouldn't want to deal with it. It's like you're paying somebody to do it for you.
Right.
Let's do it.
Can we do the
right
whole
way.
thing?
Yeah.
I want to and not even. I mean, everybody's gonna sit there and everybody can talk propaganda about how great they are. The reality is, it's still construction, but like, can we do all of it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, we can talk about the quality piece of it, but it's also like, let's just do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, gutters are an option. That seems crazy to me. So.
Yeah. It seems like it should be mandatory. It should be like a code enforced thing, right?
Some villages finally going that way, with stormwater management being a big deal, where all these gigantic houses got built in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and nobody thought anything about, well, now we've got all these gigantic houses on these small lots. Where does the water go?
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, you and I have seen it in this area.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like you have a house that's 10 feet above the other one. There's 4 feet between them. Like, no wonder you're having massive issues,
Yeah.
right? It's just, and nobody thought to regulate that,
No, and it's funny. We actually deal with one village in particular that starting in January, they really started enforcing their stormwater management rules. And our question is like, we did this exact same project 4 months ago, and now we need this. And it's like, well, it's actually been a law that's been on the books since 2004, and they just never enforced it. So it's interesting how
It's one of those things where you'll scratch your head. Hindsight's 2020, right? It's like this was around the whole time, and it was just completely overlooked.
Yeah, it's
So that's
hard.
another thing. There's tranches of legislation everywhere where you can't even follow
Bureaucracy
half
at
of it.
its best, right? Even we deal with guys all the time that just want to argue with building inspectors, and the code this or code that, and the codes are a minimum, right?
Yeah.
You can always do better.
Yeah.
It's like a restaurant saying they offer mediocre food. I mean, it seems like we could do better. We should do better. We should try and do better.
Yeah.
Granted, it's all budget related. Some people don't have a budget to do much better, but at the same time, whether it's a simple garage, you should still do it the right way instead of cutting corners. But, it's been interesting how that happens.
I guess there's a contractor for every person, but you don't need to be the contractor for every person.
Yeah,
right?
I found somebody, they say the biggest cliche is like the best job is the one that you don't get, or the one
or the one that you don't take even, right?
Yeah, correct. We don't want to take every job. I find if we are selling too many, of every 10 leads, if we're running, we sell too many, that makes me a little nervous. Like, well, what are we missing, or what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, you told me that a while ago, and that was an eye-opening thing. I've never tracked that metric inside my business actually until we had that conversation, because it's like, if your close rate's too high, you're either leaving money on the table, or the answer is probably never going to be that you're that good of a salesperson, right? You're operationally something is happening.
Yeah, I mean, egos come into play, right? Because you're like, well, I want to sell 8 out of every 10 jobs, but the reality is, one, you're more likely to find that one customer that's just going to be a nightmare, right? Which nobody wants. Yeah. And 2, you're leaving money on the table, or worst case, you're also missing something. Mm-hmm. You signed a job up and you didn't realize that village requires, a 42-inch foundation for everything, and then you just ate $10,000, right? So
because you were just turning and burning them, and then
And that's where the sales piece, it's nice to have a salesperson that is good with people, but they also have to be somewhat knowledgeable about what we're doing here, because you can little mistakes turn into big mistakes pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was actually one thing I wanted to talk to you about too, and this going back a little bit to the waterproofing and the sales versus operations. One thing that was always really nice working with you is you were the solution guy. You knew what to look for. You knew building science, so you come up with a solution, and then you would sell it. How do you now manage that dichotomy in your garage business, or just in general of like, I'm going to sell you the right solution, but we gotta inform the customer and teach them what needs to happen.
Well, I think that goes with that education and blog and educating the customer piece. Yes, we're dealing with garage instead of waterproofing, but each village has its own different requirements. There's some villages that require, even if it's the same 20 by 20 box, one village doesn't require anything. The permit's $100. They only do one inspection at the end, and it's super easy. That same garage, though, in a different municipality, there's site fencing, silt fencing. We have to do erosion control. We have to do full architectural plans with an architectural stamp, civil engineering, and next thing you know, just because of the municipality you're operating in, it adds $10,000 to the job, and people really struggle with that when they say, "Oh, well, my friend did the exact same garage in the other village." I said, "Well, yes,
Should move to his
but
village.
unfortunately, where you live, there's a lot of that. Some of it's bureaucratic. Some of it's accounting for all the bad stuff that happened during the 90s and early 2000s with the housing boom. Some of it is just technology has changed, and codes have changed, and things are different. So in terms of managing that, I think that's part of why Andrew and I are such good partners, is that he's super knowledgeable about the zoning and the permitting piece, and I'm pretty good with the building side of it. So yeah, we try and really sit down and look at the comprehensive project to make sure that, Mrs. Smith, I know the other company said X, Y, and Z, but are you sure they're aware of the village requirement for this? Or they just adopted this code. Now you have to have mandatory, EV charger for your car. That adds $1,500.
Is that a real code?
That's a thing now. Yeah, a lot of the villages are going mandatory EV.
I guess if you're going to start to ban gasoline vehicles, but it seems like that shouldn't be required.
Well, especially with everything that's happening recently, right?
Yeah.
So we don't really know, but until it actually is legislated out of the codes, we have to abide by it and have to put it in. So,
wow.
there's that type of stuff that happens. So I think it's about trying to be detailed. We have a whole. It's probably, I guess, if anybody has like a secret sauce, I think of ours is really being how diligent we are with making sure that we are on top of what each village requires, so that we don't have to walk in blind. That's probably the biggest difference.
Do you think other contractors, because it seems like you guys are smart enough to understand that and then price it into the project, do you think other contractors are, kind of screwing the homeowner with, "Hey, miss, we came up on this. Here's a change order for $10,000 because we didn't know what we were doing."
Well, that's exactly what happens. We've had clients call us back and say, "Hey, just let you know, we really wish we would have used you. We ended up the other guy ended up being more expensive in the end."
Yeah.
Because our goal is when we give him a price is that's the price.
Yeah.
You have, it's big numbers, right? It's not like you're spending $500, but it's tens of thousands of dollars. So try and get them to budget for it and prepare for it. Just sit there and play the game of, it'll be fine. And then they got them over a barrel. They have a deposit, materials ordered. Well, the village now requires this.
Yeah.
It's kind of dirty.
People do that in our business, in the restoration business, where they'll say yes to a project knowing they underbid it, and then they'll supplement it with the insurance company. And it's just a shitty way to do business.
And who wants to have that conversation, right? It's hard enough getting your normal payment schedule, and then you have to go to the homeowner and say, technically I made a mistake, and now I'm asking for money. Right?
Yeah.
And we just don't like to operate that way.
And if you haven't done it and then you're an ethical person and you're going to have to eat that cost, then it really stings, because now you've taken a project and you made it a real turd for you.
Yeah, correct. When all you had to do, and I'm a big believer that I think customers really want to buy from people that are companies that they like, they trust, and feel they're knowledgeable. And with the internet, anybody could be knowledgeable. I mean, I put in my own in-ground pool by watching a YouTube video, and I would have never done that 10 years ago. So, it's one of those things where you can get yourself in as much trouble, in that respect. But I think, doing the right thing, right? It's cheesy and cliche, but it really is. How do you want to be treated? And we try and operate that way.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of businesses that do it.
That's for sure, because there's no real barrier to entry. It's not that hard to pass a GC test. It's not,
seeing that you mentioned that, so Wisconsin, I'm a licensed GT in Wisconsin, but there's none of that required in Illinois.
I didn't even,
So any guy with a van and an cheap insurance policy can quote unquote say they're a licensed contractor, because all they have to do is be licensed in the village they're operating. City of Chicago has some requirements. There's another village, a suburb, that requires their own test. But for most part, it's the wild, wild west, So it's, you see vans licensed, bonded, insured. Well, that doesn't mean they're qualified.
Yeah.
Which really is really unfortunate.
I mean, even in Wisconsin, you pass that test, but you really, it's like, I attribute it to like a boater safety test. You go in there, it doesn't mean you know how to drive a boat. You need to know some of the navigation rules, but you could be a moron. We see it growing up in Lake Geneva.
How many car accidents are there?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So just because you have that and you checked it off the list doesn't mean you know how to build.
You don't, and that's what we're competing against, right? And that's why there's such a big disparity in the numbers people see. And so, as an uneducated consumer, how do you determine which one's right? And that's our angle, is that our blogs and our social media stuff isn't propaganda, because anybody can do that. It's more about educating them in terms of, hey, if you live in this municipality, this is kind of what you need to do, and this is why it's expensive. Or, what are some of the differences between the materials that you can use on your garage? What's the advantages of putting gutters on your garage? Just trying to help people make an educated decision. Hopefully they choose us because of that education, but at least in the end, because we want to help the industry, right?
Yeah.
And if they at least could get a good product in the end, regardless of who they use, then everybody's better off. Because I don't walk into a house with a good reputation. Like Heartland Garage Builders is great. We are. But it's one of those things where we're overcoming a negative image of the industry. Everybody knows somebody that's been either screwed, taken advantage of, had a project not get finished. It's really a tough industry to be in.
Guys run away with deposits
all the time.
It's a bad rap.
When I started the garage business, my father-in-law, who's an old retired bricklayer, kind of jokes. He said, "You guys aren't going to make it." And can we have a little faith?
Yeah,
But he just said, you guys are too nice. You're not liars, cheaters, and thieves. And I really believe that the industry doesn't need to be that. Really, it shouldn't be. But that's the that's the reputation it gets.
Yeah, and there is a lot of them out there, so it's not an unfound statement, but you can definitely choose to be an industry leader, not just another.
Yeah, why can we do a little better?
Yeah,
right? And granted, maybe we lose some jobs in that respect, but I think it's I can go home at night and feel like I didn't cheat somebody out of their deposit.
You've got skeletons in your closet. Yeah.
No, I can go in anywhere, and we do a lot of repeat business in the industry. We've done 3 garages on the same street. I don't have to drive by a house and take my
cover your logo on your side of your truck
right. That's no way to live.
Yeah.
Our goal is to build a lasting business that survives all the up and downs, and people choose us not because we're the best or whatever. It's because they're comfortable and they know that we're at least do a good job for them. Now we're not perfect. There's hiccups, there's issues that come up, but we try and communicate the best we can and problem solve and do the mea culpa as much as we can, because obviously it's not the homeowner's fault that they're going through it, but unfortunately sometimes the electrician has other builders they work for and they get bogged down or whatever the case may be. But
communication's half the battle, because most customers understand if you tell them, listen, I'm sorry, we had this guy scheduled, something came up, it's going to happen this week, but maybe it's not Monday, it's Friday, but we're going to get it done, and here's why. Most people are okay. Right. And if they're not, it's kind of the nature of the business.
It is, but I think most people are just happy with knowing that it's not a surprise. It's not well, wait a minute, they told me they was going to be here and it's now 2:00 and nobody's here. We are more proactive than that when we can and just say, hey, listen, I know we told you, the guy's coming tomorrow. He just called me. Sometimes I'll text people, I texted a customer last night, Sunday night at 8:00 to say, hey, listen, sorry for the late text. Just got word that, my electrician's sick and he's not going to be able to make it tomorrow. I don't know what day yet, but we'll let you know, just so you know that when nobody shows up in the morning, that's why.
Yeah.
Is it a great look? No, and you may not even have an answer for them, right? But just that they know that you're working on it.
What's a better look than them looking out their window at 8 a.m?
Well, and then they feel
where the
like,
hell is everybody?
Well, they feel like then they're being the project manager, right? And ultimately, that's what they're paying us for.
Yeah. So, they shouldn't have to pick up the phone and ask a question about the schedule. They should just know. Yeah.
I think if they're calling you trying to find out what's going on, you haven't done your job.
Yeah.
And again, has that happened on occasion? Yeah, I mean, there's, when we're doing, at the busiest time, we've got 14, 15 jobs going on at any one time. We're probably at the point where we need to hire somebody else, which is our goal for next year. But, sometimes, and again, you do the mea culpa, like, listen, sorry I didn't get back to you sooner, but, I'm still working on it. And as long as they know that you're on their side, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah, it is a problem in the trades when you're starting out and you're trying to scale. It's just a lot of times the buck stops with you, and sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day.
Well, it is, and we've tried to arrange the business where not every answer has to come from myself or Andrew, right? We give some autonomy to the trades. Like, listen, this is our standards. We have a very particular way we want to build our garages, and we are very try to be as best we can in terms of very diligent about what's on the plans and the spec sheets. So that way, if you ever have a question, look to the paperwork first.
Then
and that should get you the answer, and if you have a problem. So. And, we've been fortunate that we found some really good trades that are kind of seeing how we grow our business and ultimately grows their business and try and create those true partnerships, as cliche as that sounds. But, guys are, and at the end of the day, if they do something wrong, then, and I wasn't there to give them their answer, or we gave them that autonomy and ultimately it's not what the homeowner wanted, then, we just work together and figure it out from there.
Yeah.
At the end, the customer gets what they get.
Yeah. That's good, because when you have too many things that go through you, and then you're the breaking point, it sucks because you feel it with yourself, and then also you have nobody to blame. It's just
you try and be involved. I've got 4 kids, right? So trying to be involved in their lives more so than my dad was, to try and do a better job on that front. It makes it hard, when you've got your phone ringing all the time with questions, and some builders like that fire drill nature of it. I think they really thrive in that environment because they want to. There's that ego piece of it, like I'm the guy in charge, and for me, I want to give you all the tools to do your job. get out. The easiest is, hey, I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's the best relationship to have.
Yeah.
You know, okay, then they get paid, move on to the next one. I don't like creating unnecessary fire drills.
No.
Makes everybody's.
They're good when you need them in that moment if you need to really get a problem solved, but you shouldn't operate like that with your whole
No,
life.
and unfortunately, in the construction industry, that's why it gets a bad rep. Everybody, you know, slow to adopt technology. Well, how do you write a schedule? Oh, I use a pad of paper and I do that.
Or the worst one is it's right in here.
Right between the ears, right?
Yeah.
We so my partner Andrew and I actually talk all the time about not only just from us, but our trade standpoint is, you know, what if you got hit by a bus?
Mm-hmm.
You know, granted that's a terrible thing to think about, but the reality is there's still a business that needs to get run, and where does all that information go? So we've really adopted a CRM software that does scheduling and photos, file management, all those types of things, which has been a godsend for us. So, you know, if anybody has a question, go to the paperwork, they can go into the program and do
Well, it's
that.
not even just the hit by a bus. It's like the fishing analogy where it's like, can you go on a week-long fishing trip and your business doesn't
I have not been brave enough to attempt that yet. So I would love to get there, but right now, I'm a little too naive to sit there and say that I can walk away from it just yet.
But it's a scale thing.
It's
right?
a goal.
Yeah,
It's a goal.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, it would be awesome if I could.
Doesn't have to be fishing. Could be something else. But
Well, yeah,
I
my wife would love it. You know, there's been times where we used to go camping at an island up in Door County, and for the longest time, there's no cell phone service, so you really had to unplug, which is great. Well, now they finally put a cell phone tower on Washington Island on that side, so now we get a little bit of cell phone service, and I still tell people I can't, so I go up there for a long weekend, and it's fine, but a week to 10 days.
That's a lot.
lot.
Especially in the construction business. Right?
It's a lot. Yeah, could I do it in January? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Could I do that this time of year? No. I don't think so. Man,
but it keeps you going too. That's the other thing.
It does.
It's like it's what you do, right? It's. You know.
I think that's why we all do it. I think we all at some point love the challenge of working through the muck, which is fun. But some days, you know, when it's 8, 9 o'clock at night, I'm dealing with it. Maybe it's not so much fun, but in hindsight, it's pretty fun. It really is. That's why I'm still doing it. You know, I've other careers. You know, what would you do? We just did a social media thing for the volleyball that we talk about and that I coach at, where we asked the girls, well, what sport would you play if you didn't do volleyball? And so for me, it's like, what industry would I do if I wasn't in construction? I have no idea. None.
It's in your blood, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I grew up with, what I know, good or bad. Here I am.
Yeah.
Can't get out of it. For better or worse.
Yeah. Well, it's a great industry. It takes there's a lot more nuance to it, you know.
It's not as easy as everybody thinks it is.
Yeah. Well, like you can see all these home shows and everybody thinks like
HGTV. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, and this house will be done in a week. And it's like, no, it won't. It'll be over budget, off schedule.
Well, that and city of Chicago as an example, you schedule an inspection. It's all done online. You cannot call anybody at the city anymore. So what you do is you fill out an online form and you request your inspection date. And on their calendar, it'll be a week out. Well, as soon as you enter it, it'll send you an email. And it'll say, thank you for requesting that date. There will be another email confirming your actual date. And the last one we did was 4 weeks.
And yeah, how do you tell that to people? Right? You go, hey, your permit might happen, or your inspection might happen that week, or it might be a month from now. It's
well, and you won't know for another 3 or 4 days. But again, it's about educating the consumer. Anybody that's in the city of Chicago, say, listen, you know, the city's fine to work with. They just have some quirks, and one of them is a scheduling piece.
There's no phone number to call anymore where you call Bob, the building inspector, right? It's just...
There's not. Yeah. And, you know, and it's you can't close it up, right? If it's a rough inspection, you can't put it in your drywall or put the siding on until you full stop, you're done until it happens. It's not like, you know, and I've tried playing the game of, okay, let me project out and try and do it that way. And then, you know, like last spring we had, 4 or 5 weeks of like, it rained for 3 days, stop for a day, rain for 3 days. And it was a mess. And then I'm rescheduling things for that inspection. And then I'm still out 4 weeks. I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah,
just
don't let it. Yeah,
this is the way it works in the city of Chicago. We try and be as efficient with it as possible.
Yeah, this is what you're gonna have to do if you work in the city of Chicago, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, again, back to the notion of contractors, right? There's a lot of companies that really just they call it adding the city tax to it, just because of the nuances of dealing with it. They think they overcharge people. So we again try not operate that way and try and be as transparent as possible. And it's just what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta love that though. 4 weeks for an inspection.
It's wild. And then I had one. This is years ago. It was with the waterproofing, but sent an inspection. Had my email confirmation. Oh, and they only give you a window from 8:30 to 4:30. So you
you got to be on site the whole time.
You're on site the whole time. Yeah. So what do you do, right? With am I going to pay a guy there? Well, no, I'll bring my laptop and my hotspot, and I'll sit there on hopefully it's a nice day. I can sit on the front porch and get work done.
50 hours of idle time in your car.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. parking meter. Right?
Yeah, right.
But then there was a job where I had the confirmation email. The address was correct. It was great. The inspector showed up early, like 10 o'clock in the morning. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So I get out of my truck, I meet the guy, and the guy puts on his city vest, and he starts walking to the house next door. I said, no, your inspection's here. And he says, it's not what my paperwork says. And I said, well, here's my confirmation from City of Chicago. My paperwork's wrong. Didn't even do it. Boom, another 4 weeks. Had to get an attorney involved, and all that.
I would maybe not be the cool head that would prevail in that situation.
Yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard. But at the end of the day, he's just doing his job, right? He's probably overworked and underpaid and all those types of things, right? And it's not his fault. He's told only do the inspection. There's probably something where people give different addresses on purpose in a big apartment building to get past an illegal apartment or something. There's probably stuff that happens, right? So I kind of try and be the bigger person, but I was not happy.
Yeah.
I was not happy.
Because it's one of those days I've been in those situations where it's like when it happens above schedule, like, great, the rest of my day is perfect. I can get everything I wanted done.
Yep.
And then you're, nope.
No. And then trying to explain that to the customer, right? Yeah. So then you have to do the CYA stuff. Well, here's the email. Mm-hmm. Here's the guy that showed up.
Yeah, it's like you're sharing screenshots. And you're like, this just feels like it's high school.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's.
You guys have that problem here in Wisconsin. It seems like they never show up to the jobs. They just like at least the last couple of inspections we've done, just like go do it. I'm like, okay, it'd be kind of nice to have an inspection, make sure we're not going to get screwed in the long run for liability, Well,
and I think that's part of it too, right? A lot of it's for whatever reason, for the last 100 years, it's an adversarial relationship between the builders and inspectors, right? And we should all be on the same team because in the end, and I know I'm not perfect. I want another set of eyes to look at it.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. Our carpenters aren't perfect. Stuff happens, right? Yeah. So what's the harm in having somebody else? What are you so afraid of that you don't want an inspector coming and look at it?
Exactly.
Right? Now, granted, there's an occasional inspector that doesn't know what they're looking at. So there's no real benefit, but there's also no negative to it. They can come out and say, hey, listen, we did the job appropriately. The village signed off. Everything's good.
And he also offloads some of the liability on you. And it's just like...
If that were only the case, unfortunately, homeowner, I've been in, home building situations where... I'm going back to, especially with the waterproofing stuff, where I'm fixing stuff as well. This wasn't really done correctly to begin with. Well, it got inspected.
Doesn't mean they knew what they were looking at.
And so they try and go back to the city. And the city's like, well, we have no culpability. We had a guy inspecting it. We don't know what happened after we left.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. That second you left, that's when the system decided to fail.
Yeah, we did a job where a wall failed, a foundation wall failed, and we did core samples and found out the rebar was there at the inspection. There's photos of it. And then
they pulled it off.
It was gone.
Just to save the money? Yeah,
and we don't know. They said that it was during that period of the housing boom where, I was building houses on a subdivision of, 1,000 homes, and we'd leave on a Friday, come in on Monday morning, and the air conditioning condensers, all the copper's gone, all the conduits ripped out of the house. It was Wild Wild West, and so did it get stolen? Yeah, maybe.
But somebody still put the concrete in the form with no rebar in it, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Right, 100%. There was
nobody that decided to do that and go, oh, shit.
Yeah, right. So it happens, unfortunately. Again, back to the notion of the construction.
That's crazy. That is wild.
Thing. I've seen all sorts of. I've been doing this long enough now where, I want to write a book someday. Just about some.
Well, nothing would probably surprise you at this point, right?
No, not at this point.
Yeah.
Although I will say, builders and construction people in general are notoriously bad at adopting technology, right? Just the fact that. It's now 2025. We have these little devices we hold in our hand that are, more powerful than what they used to get to the moon, right? Mm-hmm. But we still build houses in the snow with pieces of wood and dudes in like fluffy hats. And it seems crazy to me that we don't do more.
Even just like photo documentation now. There's so many apps that can do that.
All those things,
at a minimum, just to cover your butt, take a picture that there was rebar in the form.
Right.
Like, I shout this company out all the time, and we don't even really primarily use them anymore, but Company Cam, love it.
Yep.
It's the shit. You don't have 10,000 photos on your phone anymore. Yeah. They're all linked to that address, and it's like you just...
Super easy.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Super easy.
Or you give it to your trades and say, hey, yep, we passed the inspection, here's the tag. Like, all that kind of stuff. You just make it...
There's really no excuse for that stuff anymore,
but
it happens.
Like, it's not like you're taking on enterprise software. It's right? $90 a month or something.
Yeah, I think it's about creating the habit of doing it, right? It's... Some guys that have pouches on and they just want to bang nails and they don't want to deal with that type of stuff.
And they're never going to change their ways, probably. It's just, they got to age out.
Well, that's the problem. They're all aging out. So the flip side of that is we have kids with technology skills, but they don't want to go into the trades. I mean, like I mentioned it before, we could probably double our business if we find carpenters, just can't find them. I've gone to trade schools. I've gone to local high schools, junior colleges. Hey, anybody looking to, start a carpentry business, we would love to help them start off their business, and
we'll give you the work, right?
Give you the
the
work,
supply,
and we, and even to the point where they have to do the work, we order all the materials and lumbers, even down to the nails. So it's a low entry point for a carpenter, but it's really hard, hard.
I hope the pendulum shifts as people start to realize that you can really make great money and have some freedom in your life, whereas and you don't have to go to college, but it's a heavy lift. It just got a stigma, around it nowadays.
It does, right? And it's not, I tell a story. I had a guy I worked with at one of the home builders, and his wife was a middle school teacher, and they had like the career day or job day, whatever. And they had asked us to come in as construction managers and project managers and talk about that part of the industry, and going to college for project management and all that type of stuff. And it just so happened on that job site we had won project of the year that year for the company, and everybody said, "Oh, you guys did a great job." We were lucky that we had the best group of foremen ever. Like our HVAC guy taught summer school at the local college. Our carpenter was like a retired teacher. We had such a well-spoken, educated group of guys. And I said, "Well, hey, I've got a really good group of guys that can really talk to young people. I would love to bring a couple of them with me." She said, "Let me talk to the principal. I'll get back to you." And got back. I said, "No, principal wants only white collar only." And the hard part about it is like, listen, I know everybody wants to be a lawyer and a doctor. Unfortunately,
somebody's got to build the law offices in the
world needs
right?
ditch diggers too. Right? Is the reality of it, and they can make a very good living. I know a lot of electricians and plumbers and carpenters are making six figures. Granted, they work hard for that.
Yeah.
But and there's something to be said for they work hard, but their work at the end of the day is done for the most part, right? They don't have to bring their phone home and deal with customers calling in the middle of the night or, dealing with that part of it. So there's some value there as well.
Yeah, because it's a give and take. If you get an office job, it will follow you home most days. You're going to be stressed about not meeting certain deadlines. But it's like if you're in the field and your goal is to roughen this house that day and you got it done, you're done.
Yep.
Right? And you have something tangible at the end of the day to see. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
that installed.
I think that's why I love it, right? Is that having that something to drive by. My kids think I'm kind of a big dork because I'll drop it. "Oh, I built that," and they're like, "Yeah, great, Dad." Like, it's to the teenager thing, but there's something that makes me feel kind of warm and fuzzy inside about that part of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And now even office jobs. Oh, well, you can't work remotely. That's a thing now. But I don't know how much longer that's going to last. People are starting to get demanded to work, back in the office. So we'll see how that changes over the next year or so.
Yeah.
It's gonna be weird.
It's been a weird couple of years,
It's funny. My father was making fun of us because when I started a small remodeling business right before the market crashed. That ultimately failed, like I mentioned before. But he said my timing is the worst, and he said if Chris is going to start a business, we need to pull our money out of the stock market. I mean, it's been that kind of great. But I think that's what happens. I lost, both builders I worked for at the time before the crash went out of business. I would have been without a job. So while the timing is bad, it was also almost out of necessity because what else was I going to do?
Yeah.
When the market crashed, I was really looking to take anything. I mean, I applied at Menards. I applied at Home Depot and, you're overqualified. I was like, I don't care if I'm overqualified. I'm telling you, I would love to have this job.
Yeah.
So it was brutal. It's really humbling in that respect.
But everything happens for a reason, right? I mean, you got into US and it brought you to
it was great. I mean, I learned a lot from Matt, and really has gotten me to the point where I am now, where I've really learned about the marketing and the sales and managing a bigger team and trying to create systems so that I wasn't the reason for every answer on the board. So learned a lot. It's kind of crazy, wild ride.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, like, companies that are in our size, that aren't, massive conglomerates, what do you think we can do to help educate kids and newcomers into the industry of why joining the trades isn't bad and what we can do to help kind of elevate our industry?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is if you value personal time and family time. I think, growing up, while I grew up super poor, everybody, at the end of the day, was out on the front porch throwing the football around in the street. There was it was at Little League. I think it was more of a close-knit community where, now where I live, and I'm grateful I live in a bigger house than I ever did, and I live in a nice neighborhood where we don't have to lock our doors. But at the end of the day, garage door goes up, car goes in, garage door goes down. I mean, yeah, some of the neighbors say hi and they'll do the barbecue thing, but I think it's just that community aspect to it and having the
That's
time
because
to
they're
do it.
distracted. Like they're just the work comes home with them, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't stop. It's
Yeah, I
just-
mean, there's times where, again, I coach volleyball, and there's parents that I didn't even never met their dad before.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. I think life's too short to just bury your nose in a computer and not, help other kids. I've been fortunate enough that I've been working for myself long enough that even with all the financial ups and downs of learning and School of Hard Knocks type stuff, I was always there for my kids.
Mhm.
The coaching and the traveling for the sports and being at state track meets and math team meets and all that type of stuff, I think is more valuable than any amount
They'll
of money I
remember
could've
that. They
made.
won't remember the times you're not at home with, right? Or
Well, and that's kind of how I viewed it. Is what do I remember from my childhood? I remember my dad being home, but not necessarily as available because he worked in the labor side of it, right?
Mhm.
So I wanted to find that kind of in between, and I've been
Well,
fortunate
and I
enough
guess
to do that.
telling, telling incoming kids like, yeah, you may start out as a laborer, you might become a carpenter, then you might become a foreman, and then there's a ladder inside of construction that you can also climb.
Yeah, 100%. My oldest son is dealing with that struggle. He went and played volleyball in college, found out he didn't really like it, right? So what's his next move? And we're still trying to figure that out. But I said, listen, you can go as soon as you get out of high school, you can learn a skill that'll serve you well over your lifetime. You can start earning a good wage. You won't have a ton of college debt. And then even if you get into a good company or a union, the benefits, pensions, that's all stuff that, is kind of going by the wayside, right? I mean, healthcare is just a dumpster fire, with the costs and navigating that whole thing. And
I get surgery on Wednesday, and it's a front row seat to how screwed up the system is.
Why am I paying $84 for an Advil? Can I just bring my own bottle? It just really is broken.
That box of tissues, that's $250.
Well, and I just, again, getting stuck in that airplane mode where you're sitting there just doom scrolling Instagram. I saw a video where a guy was on a phone with his insurance carrier, and some of the paper got messed up where he got a bill that said, "Oh, my surgery was $3,500 if he was uninsured." Well, he's like, "No, wait, I am insured." He sent in his paperwork, and he was insured as a date of service. He goes, "Oh, it's not $3,500. You have to pay $6,800." He's like, "Well, wait a minute.
Can I take my insurance off?"
and that was the joke of the video was that no, you were insured at the time of service. So I'm paying more. It just is ludicrous.
It's ass backwards.
And I think that's the part where kids don't understand is that there's advantages to being in the trades and helping with all of that. And I think it's a great avenue. You don't have the tremendous amount of debt. It took me forever to get out of, my wife and I's student debt. We've been lucky enough that my oldest daughter just graduated college and has very little debt to speak of. Super fortunate on that front, but most kids don't, right? I mean, I heard student loans is, I think, the second largest debt that, people in America face. So it's not good, and then, my daughter, she got out of college. She went to a top 100 university. She's making $40,000 a year. That's $2,500 more than I made my first job out of college 25 years ago. She's still living at home, right? And it's a tough way for young people to go. Whereas if you had gone in the trades, you could be making $20,000 more than that. Granted, harder work, but I think, long term, it really give you a leg up.
Yeah.
And the autonomy, right? You can go on a vacation. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
And I know plenty of people that have parlayed a early career in the trades. My dad included, right? Like, it started off as an electrician, and then you parlay it to you've learned how to work with people, you learn how to manage customers, all this, and then you can move into a business if you want to.
Yeah, correct.
And you can always upskill, but if you can start out with that foundation of, okay, this is what a hard day's work feels like, this is what true honest living is, and move it into something if you have the passion for it. It's not like that's impossible.
Right. Well, and I think it's also there's a safety net aspect to it too. Like if you have that base knowledge where you can at least work in the trade, and let's say you did want to start your own business and then you find out that it either didn't work or bad timing.
Yeah.
Anything like that, you can always fall back and just go back into the trade.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of young people that are coming out of college that are, if they're struggling with their career choice initially, that sometimes doesn't translate.
Skill.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always do that. And it's, I think that's a big talking point for the young people, but I don't know what it is. And it's always stereotypical, right? And I hear people older than me complain about the generation, right? Like, oh, they don't hard work. Yeah, well, you guys raised them, right? So there's some culpability on our side too. Right?
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate that I've got 4 great kids that are hard workers that Some of them have probably been on some of the projects, that we've done together where, my son's home for the summer. Going to go dig ditches.
Yep.
You're learning the value of that.
Yeah.
You're he's 6'8", though. So working in some of the small basements isn't great. But, but he's a good worker and learns the value of it. And the notion of, I've always been a firm believer in myself that it doesn't matter what happens. Market crashes, I will always be able to provide for my family, right? And I think that's also part of it. Instead of sitting in the corner going, woe is me, go out, you got to find something.
Yeah. Make it happen.
Yeah, I take pride in that, right? I can at least provide for my family no matter how bad it gets. Mm-hmm. But yeah, young people's a tough one. It's hard work.
I think it's on the current generation of business owners, at least for trade wise, to just keep pushing that narrative and working at it. And
agreed.
Something will break eventually, or things change.
Well, it's not us,
yeah.
right?
Or will.
yeah. Well, I think that's also part of it too. Is that there's a lot of guys that are. Like I said, I've gone to junior colleges to try and drum up carpenters and things of that nature. But there's still a lot of guys, my age that just complain about it. Well, what are you doing to help the situation? My wife used to tell my kids, and I can't remember what the exact saying. It was basically like, don't be a problem pointer outer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be a problem solver.
Yeah, because just bitching about it doesn't
No.
help.
No, what have you done to help it?
Yeah.
Nothing. Oh, just complain more. Cool.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Well, thanks. That you added to the other 10,000 complaints.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What helped is that, oh, and by the way, the customer's here too now. So now you just put yourself, in another bad light. So I don't know. It's tough. It's a problem that definitely has to get solved. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's also one of the things, with AI and all that technology we're talking about. I think whatever disruption happens for people in the technical industries and manufacturing stuff, stuff still needs to get built, and I don't necessarily think that that's going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah,
so,
the barrier to when computers can start to take over true trades is a significantly steeper climb. Like, there's robots that can pour foundations and stuff now, but it's so far away from being mass produced. There's going to be a long time before you need to.
Which is funny, and there's even problems with that. So we actually partnered with a company in the city that did affordable housing, and their platform was modular housing and factory built stuff. And the city of Chicago, I'm sure New York or any big city is the same way, where it was really an upward hill climb to be able to get to the point where they can do manufactured housing. And it's not your typical like double wide type stuff. It's very modern, stacked multifamily stuff. But then the village required them to have covered parking spaces. So they needed 20 by 20 garages. Their facility is not capable or designed to handle something of that nature. So while they're doing these cool affordable housing modular projects that go up in, a month and a half, they have hired us to go build garages for them because they have that need. Right? Yeah. The old way, just because of how that all works, right?
Yeah.
So I think
it's like eventually you can see how they could probably solve that, but it's not right now.
Right.
And we need to fix that issue.
Yeah, there's always a need
term.
for something, right? There's always going to be a need for a tradesman somewhere, right? And even the guys that are in the factories, right, still need to know how to put the stuff together. And in that respect, I think that'd be a great spot to be. You're not in 100-degree sun. You're not in the rain. You're not in the cold. I still don't understand why we haven't adopted that more quickly. It really is shocking to me.
Yeah, when you're out in the middle of the winter building a house, it's
slushing through the
snow. I've never been a carpenter, but we definitely worked in, just barely closed up homes in January, and my God, it sucks.
Yeah, especially around here, right? It's windy, it's cold, it gets, I had a professor in college once that was from Ireland, and his whole thing was like, Chicago winter, no big deal. I'm from Ireland, it gets cold there. And he showed up in like just a jean jacket, and showed up in January, it was 10 below, and that's a whole different world, right? So I think, it's tough. Tough. It's a tough gig. I don't know, Florida, Texas, it's still hot, right? That's not necessarily
if you're not going to be cold, you're going to be sweating your butt off, and
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but it's a problem that definitely has to get solved, right? I think as that pool of labor shrinks, we're all fighting over the same people, and right, it's supply and demand. Next thing you know, you're I don't want to say overpaying because it's whatever that market will bear, but at the same time, prices are going to go through the roof. You're going to be fighting over the trades. That stigma of construction being slow and delays is
just going to get way worse.
It's only going to get worse, right?
Yep.
So we have to do something, what's the guy from Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe, that has been really trying to push that narrative through This Old House and all that type of stuff. I think that's awesome. Mm-hmm. But it's going to take more grassroots than the celebrity doing it. And I think the trades really need to band together. I think it would be cool to have, the builders associations or their modeling associations really get together and do that.
And pool some resources, right? I mean,
I don't know why the industry isn't more collaborative, right? Mm-hmm. I think we could all put our brains together and
there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of scarcity mindset in the construction, right? I think a lot of people have been burned by slowdowns and things like this. And so it's like, take, when it's
feast or famine.
There is work out there. We're
really
better
is.
as a community, not as all enemies, and
yeah, why does it have to be so cloak and dagger? I really don't think it needs to be that way. At the end of the day, people are going to buy from the company that they feel is right, and you can't account for personality conflict. They maybe just didn't like what you were wearing. You were at the house that day. It could be something as trivial as that. So, like I said, there's plenty of work to go around, and there's plenty of work to go around for guys that want to do it the right way.
Yeah, for sure.
Even having women enter the workforce, I think, is a big notion too. That would be great. Over my career, I've been lucky enough to work with a plumber that was amazing. That was a woman. Same thing with an electrician. I think that's another thing that I think we could all use. In terms of an input of labor would be great. Again, but I don't know why everybody's so afraid of that type of stuff. But we have to do something.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
And quickly, right? I mean, every year we sit there at the beginning of the year. All right, well, here's the plan. We'd love to grow X amount of %. What's the biggest hitch in that? Finding the labor, right? I used to think getting the phone to ring and finding the business was going to be the hardest part. And what I found is if you do a good job and have a good reputation and educate consumers, that part of it, while it isn't easy, it's not the biggest problem. It's how do you get the stuff built?
It seems like it's a Cadillac problem, but it's still a problem, right? It's like the phone's ringing great. We got projects in the pipeline, awesome, but if we want to grow and then you're stuck because you can't fill it, it sucks too. It's an equally as painful problem,
right?
Because it's sitting right there. It's like having a check that's blank, but you don't have a pen.
100%. Yeah, I'm sorry. Or we're doing this, right? Well, like last year we got through. I think it was end of June, early July, where based on our manpower situation, we had already sold enough business. We were booked all the way through the end of the year. We're pushing people to the next spring. If it's more of a want than a need, like the garage didn't fall down in a windstorm or a tree fell on it, then maybe people are willing to wait. Maybe. So yeah, it's tough. And that problem is not particular to us just because we're doing well. It's anybody in the industry is having the same problem. So I don't know why we don't get together in a better way to try and fix it. And it's kind of weird that way.
Yeah, I'm hoping we talk loud enough about it for long enough.
Yeah. When's it going to change? Right? And I don't know what it's like. The chicken or the egg. Is the contractor base the problem? Is it the young people? Is obviously somewhere in between. But I don't know what's the right way to fix it. And how do you start that ball rolling where you can, I truly believe if you had young kids doing Instagram videos on their job sites at lunch saying, "Hey man, this is awesome," I think that would help a lot.
Industry associations can help facilitate something like that, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it sounds cheesy and kind of dorky, but I think kids are right here all the time. So I think anything you do to get that in front and center would be great. Yeah. The other problem is you're seeing everybody else on Instagram is I'm in Bali doing my blah 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 startup, living the and. Okay.
And who knows when that's real? I mean, I'm sure some people are doing it real, and then you hear the story of the guys exposed for not actually coming true.
Right.
So.
Right. Oh, the Lamborghini was rented for the
weekend,
exactly.
Right?
Like, what are we doing?
I've seen fake private jet cabins where it's just cut in half, and there's and it's like, okay, that is just stupid.
For what? Vanity, right? I think that's the big thing. I was a history major in undergrad, and they talk about most of the falls of the big empires were when vanity becomes the most recognized trait of that civilization. Really, civilization struggles and. Everything that's going on, it feels really weird.
Feels like really it's weird. Pointing more in that direction.
Are we going to collapse? No, but there's going to be some sort of reset. What is it going to look like? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know that, but something has to change, right? The system just can't be combative and at odds and so, left versus right and top versus bottom. There's got to be collaboration. It really does. That's, the answer is usually in the middle, whatever that means.
But. Yeah, it's hard to get back to there.
Yeah, I don't know what that takes. We have some guys we deal with in the trades that love what's going on, and then all of a sudden they get hit with the tariff stuff, and now all their materials coming from Mexico and Canada, and they just happen to be in that one little sector that didn't. When he rolled that stuff back, they're still affected, and so it's tough. Yeah, it's kind of a hot mess.
Yeah, but it's the industry we chose, right?
Yeah, did we choose it or did it choose us, or how does that go? But yeah, I still love it. That's just another layer of complexity to it. But at the end of the day, it's serving clients. And people ask, "Oh, you're in the garage business, you're in the construction industry." I was like, "Yeah, but we're a service industry. We're still providing a service above anything else. I think people choose us because of that. And
Yeah.
try and do a good job. And yeah, it's wild. It's got to change. Something's got to change. I just don't know what that looks like.
Neither
Not
do
smart
I.
enough. I wish I could, because then we'd be off living on
It's
the
up
beach
to the
somewhere.
universe to decide for us, I guess.
Yeah, that's also a little scary. Now what's gonna happen in 5 years? I don't know. I have an idea of where I'd like to be, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I gonna get there?
I just choose to just keep doing everything I can.
And do it to
choose
the
that
best of our can. Yeah,
Exactly.
That's all
And
you
whatever
do.
happens. It's outside of our control,
Yeah.
Like to your point, you don't know if you're going to get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? So just keep doing what you're going to do.
You don't. Yeah, the what if, right? It's somebody else knows, like, when you're 80 and dying, what really mattered to you.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your regrets going to be?
I think even just the fact that I'm sitting here with you, right, is something that, through the industry, you meet somebody that has the right mindset about it, and you can agree with how they want to operate their business. I think, we've sent business back and forth, right? I think all that is the way it should be.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this.
Yeah, it needs to be
Ivory
collaborative,
tower.
right?
Yeah, it has
It was
to
like
be.
when you were slowing down your shop for the waterproofing to go into the
Yeah.
garages. I didn't like any of the other companies. I'm like, hey, I want to do this project. Can you give me some advice?
Yeah,
And it's just we're helping each other out.
Yeah, why not? Right?
Yeah.
It just brings the bottom up. Right?
Yeah,
At the end of
exactly.
the day, so I think that's important.
A couple questions about family life. So I know you said you got 4 kids.
Yep.
How do you manage that? It's one thing I haven't.
I
had
have
to
an
solve that yet.
amazing life partner, my wife. And the kids are older now, right? So I've got 23, 21, 19, and 17. So my oldest daughter just graduated from college, and she's working for a state's attorney's office and is talking about law school and living at home. My oldest son, like I said, originally played volleyball in college.
6'6", you said as well.
6'8".
6'8", holy
yeah,
cow.
he's even taller than I am. Just college wasn't for him, right? So we're still trying to figure out that next step for him. And then my youngest daughter is fortunate; she plays volleyball at the University of Iowa. Absolutely loves it. The resources that some of those big schools get for athletics and stuff is awesome. They fly private charter. They get catered meals. I mean, it's. When I played volleyball in college, we were in 15 passenger vans and sharing the 5 foot long, the $5 foot long subway. And now it's amazing. It's great. And and then on about that disparity thing, though, I look back and say, well, how many other kids can we put through college, instead of having them fly private charter? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm grateful my daughter gets to be a part of it. And then my youngest son's a junior, started driving about 6 months ago. That's interesting. It's stressful having all that, but they're all living at home. Everybody's healthy. I've been fortunate that my wife was able to stay home and raise the kids. So I think she's probably the biggest supporter of us and the reason for that. But
And you said you guys met in college, was that it?
we actually met in high school. So
high school.
yeah, totally weird. So her dad was one of our coaches for the travel team that I played at, and we actually met at a national tournament in Orlando, Florida, the summer before senior year. And just stayed in touch. And she was a student athletic trainer. And the following season, I had messed up my ankle. And her dad's like, hey, Christy, we need somebody to tape an ankle. Would you mind coming in and doing it? So she taped my ankle. And then literally at one point, I don't know why I even said, I go, well, you've already seen my feet, so you want to go on a date? It's kind of how that happened. And then, started dating, halfway through our senior year. And she ended up going to Loyola, early admission. And I was an athlete, super poor, been on my own since 17. School and high school wasn't exactly a priority, so I didn't have the best grades. Took me a while to get in. I got denied the first 2 times to get into Loyola, so I thought I was going to end up at another school. Fortunate enough, got into Loyola my third time, third try, and then we ended up going to college together. I got married in college, and been rolling ever since. It's been a blast. We were lucky enough to have kids young, so we're still active with them. We do kayaking and camping and all that type of stuff. And she's the best human I know. Like, our kids are way better humans than I ever was at their age, which is really cool to see.
That's awesome.
I think the world in general just needs better humans. And,
Yeah.
At least our kids are that. Hopefully they'll eventually move out of the house at some point. I thought we'd be down to only one at this point, but no, we're not. And on one hand, it's a little stressful at times because everybody's now I'm an adult and I'm doing my own dishes,
some personalities, and
fighting over the laundry, and
Yeah.
I'm only going to do my laundry, or I'm only going to, we have a family dinner. We really try to sit down and do a family dinner once or twice a week. And it just happened a couple weeks ago where my oldest daughter was like in a rush to do something. We're like, all right, Katie, let's help, with dinner dishes. And she gets up and she takes literally her plate, her fork, her cup, washes it, pushing the dishwasher and like, Lisa, where are you going? She's like, well, I did my dish. I'm like, well, that's not how this.
We're not going for that. That's a community event.
Yeah, right. And so it's been interesting, but there's times where, I'm going to bed and all of a sudden I hear them kind of giggling down in the basement because they're all still hanging out and they're like best friends. So that part of it's really, really cool. Again, still want them to leave, but
yeah,
right for the time being, it's pretty cool.
That's how I grew way closer with my brother because he was, after college, I started a business with my dad and I was still living at home at the time. And it was like the best because he's 8 years older than I am.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was one of those things where, there's that big of an age difference,
right.
I'm so young, he's in high school. It's like, you can't connect, but those were years where I was able to really get close with him. Right. And it's, it turned out for the best.
Yeah, it's a blast. We've been fortunate enough to have, like some oldest daughter's going to go to law school. My two other kids played collegiate athletics, which I'm partial to, which is kind of a cool experience. I've been glad to kind of share that with them. And my youngest boy is probably maybe the most athletic of the group and wants to play volleyball in college as well. And hopefully we'll be fortunate
He's going to be 7'1". So.
No, actually, no, he's only 6'2". I say only 6'2",
yeah.
but everybody talks to him and says, "Hey, Ty, if you were Ryan's height, you'd be going to UCLA or something." Oh, I know. Yeah. Like the old Webster sitcom where he was hanging upside down in the closet type stuff.
Yeah, stretch his spine out.
Yeah, but he's not. He'll be going downstate for track and all that type of stuff. Good basketball player, so he's a good all around athlete, and he's super smart. He was on the math team, and we've been blessed. Our kids are all great, healthy. It's been awesome.
Amazing
stuff that I never thought. If I look back when I was in high school, like if you'd have told me, yeah, you'd be 47 and have 4 kids and own a business, it's pretty successful, and you really don't have any worries, I would have been like, yeah, okay. It's really been fortunate, and my wife's been a big part of that. She's really helped me learn to be a better human and all that type of stuff, especially being a parent. While my dad was around, my parents got divorced and it wasn't great. And then I was on my own when I was 17, so trying to figure out how to navigate the world that young without any help was weird. Meeting her was kind of a blessing in a disguise.
Yeah.
So it's cool. Yeah, it's cool.
Well, you're a good example for what you should strive for, right? It's like make it a better generation than what you guys.
Listen, I've made a lot of mistakes too, right? Mm-hmm. Let's not get it twisted. Like I'm sitting here and I'm happy, but man, there was times where it was bumpy. Like going through the market crash and losing a house and losing a car and where are we going to live? That type of stuff. Thinking that, I'm a hard worker, I can go get a job anywhere, and then you can't get a job at Menards Home Depot because you're overqualified. And losing friends in that scenario was interesting, right? Like people that all of a sudden it was almost like you had leprosy or something. Like it was like it was something they were going to contract. It was
I didn't think friendship should end over something like that.
You wouldn't think, right? But it was really paranoia. I don't know what it was. It was very interesting. You really found out when you didn't have any. You didn't have the money to go on the fancy trips or spend $1,000 at the bar over a weekend. Who your friends really are. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. And now I've got a very close group that.
What's a good litmus test for them? It's like maybe you weren't meant to be in my life long term.
And I didn't know at the time, right?
Yeah.
Because life was good. It really is. When you go through hard times, you find out who your friends are, and I've been fortunate to realize that. And again, my wife would probably say, I would rather not go through that again. I learned so much through making those mistakes and having that happen to where I'm trying to protect myself from ever having to go through that again, right? Or teaching my kids that, once we're gone, that they don't have to go through that, right? Mm-hmm. So, trying to build something that's not a legacy or something to hand down, but at least knowledge for them to be able to survive anything that happens.
Yeah, so you don't have to go necessarily all the way through it like you did, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
you can maybe see the warning signs and.
We talk to our kids all the time. Like the coolest thing for us would be to have them do better than us, right? That's the goal. So knock on wood, they're on that path right now, and hopefully they stay there. We'll try and do everything we can to do it. But yeah, my wife's the kingpin in all of it. She's one of the smartest people I know. She kicks my butt at Scrabble all the time. So bad, and this is how bad it is with the Scrabble thing, that one year for Christmas, about 3 years ago, my kids, I had won 2 Scrabble games in a row. And I think one of them was literally, I think I butchered the board by doing like cat bad hat, so like she couldn't do any big words anywhere. So I really kind of slummed it. They took the 2 score sheets and framed it and gave it to me.
Because it's such a rare occurrence.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So
household champion twice in a row.
Yeah, and I'm super competitive. Like my kids are 8 years old. We're playing basketball in the driveway, and I'm
just dunking on them.
Yeah, I'm swatting them. I'm like, they're not winning anything. There's been times where I've accidentally bumped the Scrabble board. Oh, sorry, and I guess we're done. That has been known to happen. But yeah, she's great, and I think that's a big part of it, is finding a partner to go through that stuff with. To understand the trials and tribulations of being an entrepreneur and owning a business, and because it's not for everybody. You know?
Yeah,
There's
and if
even
your
times where I question myself if it was for me. I don't know,
and if your partner's not on the same page, it's a recipe for disaster.
It's hard,
for one or the other. The business might suffer, or your relationship might suffer, but for sure something's
to
happening.
do both, right? It's I've been lucky, super lucky, grateful for it, you know. And she's like my best friend. You know, we laugh and joke and inappropriately sometimes, you know. But and I think if I had to worry about going home and like, oh man, what's she gonna be? You know, there is zero of that, you know. So that makes it easier to try and build a business or dedicate some time, you know. I got back from, you know, Kentucky last night. You know, I said, hey, I know I just got back. I really need to take care of some things for Monday morning. She's like, man, do what you got to do. You know, no problem. So that's a big.
It's having a good teammate.
Absolutely. You know, my business partner, Andrew, right? You know, he's one of the most calm, honest, nicest individuals I've ever had the pleasure of working with, you know. So the fact that it's lasted, you know, we're going into 5th or 6th year now, and no real tip. I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
And I never have to worry about, and maybe this is me being naive, I guess, but I mean, there's never a question of he's not doing the right thing for the business and vice versa. We're both on the same page in that. And that's been a huge thing. Cause I didn't have that experience with my first business. In hindsight, I was completely unaware. I thought things were great. And then once the market crashed and I lost everything, I had to kind of do the postmortem on what actually happened and found out, there's some things
Maybe they
happening.
didn't have my best interest in mind.
They did not. You know, so, and I know a lot of people are dead set against having business partners, but I think it's great. You know.
I've had my fair share of experiences with that, but I think, you know, if you find the right people, you're stronger together. It's just you got to find the right people.
Yeah, I mean, where are you at with your business? I mean, growth. I mean, I see everything you've done here. Where are you at with next steps and all that type of stuff? You know,
learning and growing every day. I think we're at a really fun part right now where we're primed to grow quite a bit without having to take on and, you know, bring in a lot of new guys. Like we're ready for our next phase, which is nice. Our goal is to start getting into commercial work this year. So it's been. And whenever anybody asks me how's business going, it's just a constant lesson, right? Every day is a new problem and new thing to solve, but I love that portion of it, right? And it's just been awesome. I wouldn't have expected it to take the path that it did. When you first conceptualize a business plan, you're like, oh, it's gonna be great. We're gonna start here. Next year we're gonna be at $1 million, then $2 million. It's like no, throw that plan away. Right. Here's what's gonna happen, but you got to learn how to enjoy it along the way, and it's been awesome.
I think the journey is part of it, right? The destination is great if you hit all those goals, but it's what do you learn along the way?
Yeah,
I think it's kind of part.
Yeah,
is part of it too.
And building a team has been fun, right? Building a group of people that can care for your customers and do the right thing when you're not looking
And that's interesting because I didn't have that experience with the waterproofing, right? With my business, I really struggled with that part of it. I found that was probably the biggest pain point I had and was the most frustrating part of my business was trying to find guys that want to break up concrete every day. I mean, it was brutal. And you try and, you know, offer, you know, little benefits here and there to try and help along the way, but it was still just that part of it I really struggled with and really didn't enjoy. And hearing you say you like building the team part of it, having a team when you build it is awesome. Mm-hmm. I think for me getting there it was difficult.
I think the one benefit that we have is every day with us is so different from the last because there's a lot of different projects. Every project has its different variables, which I think keeps guys fresh. Because if it's like the same day you're doing drain tile every day,
here's a jackhammer again. Yeah,
you're gonna get burned out. But if it's, you know, Monday through Wednesday is interior drain tile, then the next day you're doing a flood because of a burst pipe, and then the next day you're doing an attic. It's like, yeah, maybe the work's not easy, but it's different, and it keeps the brain stimulated. You know, it's just a little different in that aspect. You know, and we try to tie it into. I think a great exercise is giving like a vision for where you want to go and helping people make sure that they know they're part of it. Right. They have a real path for it. And that's what I like doing.
Being on the same
it's
team.
like, hey, here's where we want to go. Here's your, you know, even if you're just an entry level guy doing the labor, you still really matter in this plan here. Yeah. You know, and that's something that's hard to do in the beginning. The people, right? That's the biggest investment you make, but it's also the hardest to fill. It's really finding people that. That's the one that sucks is when you have somebody that's really good and then they got to leave, you know.
Do you ever second guess yourself on what you could have done differently to keep them?
Yes, but I also trust the laws of the universe. I'm like, if it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't.
Just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
And I think when stuff like that happens, it's like, man, I must have done something wrong, right? Or what did I mess up to have that person leave? Because man, I think I'm awesome, right?
Yeah.
I think it's getting over that ego part of it for me. It was really a tough one, and that's what's nice about the garage is it's all subcontracted. We are doing a much bigger book of business, revenue wise, with less people in the office, which I think helps.
Yeah, you don't have to go through all that.
I'm not juggling as many pieces, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I'm juggling subcontractors, but again, if we create an environment where they always want to work for us, that part of it makes it, almost easy.
Yeah.
There's always blips to that.
I think I like to look at it from a perspective of, was there anything major that I could do different as a leader? But it's like if the person wasn't right for the role or it was just bad timing, then it's just, you just got to kind of move on and take it as it is,
It's a tough one for me.
Yeah. It sucks because you invest a lot of time, a lot of money.
That's everything's the turnover is brutal.
Yeah.
There's a lost revenue,
and a lot of times it comes right as you've just finally got to the point where you realize like, oh, this person's autonomous here. They can do this now. I don't have to worry about them. Oh, sorry, I gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I used to think that, well, if they went off and did their own thing, then I think, okay, that's cool. They learned a lot. I was able to teach them where they felt confident enough to do that on their own. Like that part of it was cool. I've had one guy that did that. The other times I'm like, man, what did I do wrong? Because I almost look at it as maybe it's ego, but like a personal affront. Like what I've tried to do everything I can here to make it as comfortable as possible, or as and it doesn't work out that way. It's always look like, what did I do wrong? It's really, and I guess that's an interesting way to look at it. That's just sometimes people just do. Yeah,
I think you don't want to be naive to the point that there's ways to improve, but also it's just
sometimes people make different choices.
Yeah.
I guess the commute's
I used to take everything. I think I used to take everything really personally.
Yeah.
And then I've tried to get away from that because it's not, you just can't operate that way. Like with customers, used to get really, I'm like, I promise you, I'm trying to do the best thing for you, trying to help you. And sometimes they're just not going to go with you. And it just, you can't beat yourself up over it. Over and over again,
we found where people, you don't, the way we try and train, like our office manager is like, there's some days where you don't know what's going on in that person's life. Yes, they decided to take it out on that one cracked outlet cover, and they are raising all kinds of hell because of it. But you don't know what happened on the rest of their life that's causing them to feel that way. I mean, somebody's sick, somebody died, their dog died, they lost their job. That there's so many other forces there that can cause people to kind of go off the rails. I never really thought about it from an employee standpoint, though. I guess it's kind of funny now that I'm sitting there thinking about it.
I see it from a customer standpoint a lot because we see people with bad days, and it just,
especially with what you deal with,
you just let them vent. Sometimes you're a punching bag. Sometimes you have to step back a little bit and be like, listen, I get it, but most of the time just let them vent, and usually it'll work out in your favor. They'll calm down and they'll realize, okay, hey, maybe that was not, maybe I was in the wrong.
Maybe I didn't handle that
cooler heads
properly.
failed, but
that happens.
You never know.
That's funny. Are you still doing work just primarily around here, or how far do you go?
An hour from here, hour radius. So any further, just for the emergency response stuff, you can't. Yeah, somebody calls, they got a flooded basement, they want you there within an hour.
Sure.
So
that part, I couldn't imagine dealing with that.
Yesterday I called. It's funny. I haven't called you for a technical question in a while, and I'm in a basement and couldn't. That turns out the pump was bad. If you were wondering. But yeah, it's just Sunday afternoon. You're like, do we really want to go do this? No. Got to do it,
Yep. That's funny.
The way I keep it is just, okay, it's another job to keep the guys busy, keep the bills paid, the lights on. Just the business I chose. If I wanted a job that wasn't, Sunday afternoon emergency calls, I should have chose a different industry. So.
That's true too.
Yeah.
That's the emergency stuff.
But to your point, you were talking about contractors liking the chaoticness. I do enjoy that. I grew up, being in like that caretaker role where everything was always the biggest problem in the world, even though it wasn't. And I enjoy that little under the gun problem solving nature. Sure. So that's, I think, kind of why I got attracted to this industry.
Yeah, and I like the production building side of it, where you try and create a plan and create it where the best thing that can happen is it really does work like a well-oiled machine where I can be hands off and focus on other stuff. I don't like the hair on fire, what problem am I solving now? And that's something I've tried to avoid. As much as I can have a very candid conversation with somebody, I'm not a person that really likes heavy confrontation. I just, if we're in that position, something else went wrong that shouldn't have. So I don't like that at all. I like okay, we're gonna start 2 jobs a week, and it's gonna that's kind of how I envision and want it to go.
And my life in this business is the total opposite of that. It's like, we had 5 jobs scheduled we were going to do this week, and one came in last night, and so the entire week is blown to shit, and we got to figure out how to get it all back together. And I kind of enjoy that,
No wait, I'd be a hot mess. I'd have hives. It's maybe not be good. It's not my thing.
Keeps you on your toes.
You young. Keeps you young, as I say.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's aged me, but
yeah. At least you're not the Bears head coach. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Changing job every year.
Yeah. It could be worse. It's funny. Yeah, life's good. No complaints. It's been awesome.
So if people are interested in a garage or to connect with you, how can they do that?
So they find us, on the web at hlgbs.com. Find us on the web. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the social stuff.
You've always been good on LinkedIn. You always provided good content.
Yeah, it's funny. I really think it's been an interesting way to find people that want to do work, and it's everybody always has a guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be
You're
that
the garage guy.
Want to be that guy.
Yeah.
We do a lot of networking events with real estate agents, property management companies, home inspectors, that type of stuff to try and just get our name out there. Because again, it's a lot of people, who do I build a garage? Who builds a garage?
I didn't know it was an industry until I met you.
And I didn't really until Andrew approached me, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, it's a weird niche that, the web, social media, all that stuff is pretty easy.
Cool.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.
Chris Stephanitis, awesome. Heartland Garage Builders. Awesome. Find him on Google, LinkedIn.
Yeah, all the places, I guess. Yeah, Heartland Garage Builders. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you.
All right, folks, that's all the time we had for this episode. We're going to end it here and hopefully catch you on the next one.